It is my deepest honor to be standing here among you today. I was raised Baptist in a very tiny town in Missouri. And being raised Baptist, you get taught the name Judson from a very young age. So I knew that name. If you're like me, though, you often find that Baptist heritage to offer up a strange mix of pride and embarrassment. When I began working full-time in faith-based reproductive choice work in 2001, I had to do some homework to really get to know the history of the work of people of faith in the struggle for abortion access. And I was very proud to find that history led to this place, a place of Baptist heritage. Not only did you begin the clergy consultation service on abortion, you even opened the first abortion clinic. Whoa. I love sharing those facts everywhere I went to speak, just to see the surprised looks on people's faces. For 14 years, I have been talking about Judson, the amazing work that began here within these walls, the way that you reached out to clergy and women all over the country long before most of us out there in the hinterlands even had abortion access. I have always considered what I do directly connected to what you did. I am a direct descendant of the clergy consultation service on abortion. And because of this, I have, for all of these years, felt connected to you all the way from St. Louis without ever knowing a single name of a person here. Imagine my surprise and delight when my administrative assistant said, "You have someone persistently calling you from Judson Memorial Church in New York. They really want to talk to you." It did not take me a moment to pick up the phone. I didn't care what it was about. I was like, yeah, I want to talk to Judson. Now, the story of how that phone call came to be is one that's very dear to my heart. One you may not have heard. The Reproductive Justice Task Force here had been working for a while. They were looking for a partner in new ministry to help reinvigorate the church's participation in nationwide access to abortion. A few hundred miles away from you and a few hundred miles away from me, there were two young actors cast in a play. One was my son, and the other was Holly Bean's daughter. It was a two-person play. And so these two actors, which the play actually happened to be about a mother, and so these two actors, at some break, somehow got to talking about their mothers. I think we should both be very proud that our children even talked about us, and apparently it was positive. And they discovered that their mothers had a mutual passion for reproductive justice. And Emmy Bean said to Aaron Lawson, "I have to tell my mother about your mother's work." And she did. And so we found one another, bringing faith-based concern for women's reproductive health to Judson, to St. Louis, back to Judson, back to St. Louis, and back here again, coming full circle again and again. Now, my work, as I've been saying, is based in St. Louis. and we are now called Faith Aloud, but we have been through several different incarnations ourselves over the decades. In the late 1960s, as the clergy consultation service was being formed here, they reached out to clergy in St. Louis and asked them to be trained to counsel women and to get those women on airplanes and to give them the money they needed to fly here to New York to get the abortions that they needed. For years, our organization has been honoring those clergy, many of whom are still in St. Louis, retired now from their own active work, but not retired from being counselors for us, not retired from being involved in the advocacy work in Missouri. Our work has evolved a great deal over the years, but the one constant that we have consistently done is we've kept on training clergy to counsel pregnant women and to counsel those who have chosen abortion. Our counseling service was originally just for those women in St. Louis, but then it spread to all of Missouri. And before we even knew it or even tried to do it, suddenly women were calling us from all over the country. We developed close relationships with abortion providers all over the country and even somewhat beyond. And they began asking for, we began responding by providing them with religious resources that they could use right there in their clinics. Those resources are now, as far as we know, used in 6 different countries by abortion providers on 4 different continents. I presented that exact same training just yesterday to clergy and seminarians right at the Judson parsonage. Religious support for women is as important today as it was in the 1960s. The stigma that is faced by women today when they choose abortion is intense and it is demeaning. It comes at women from the media, from family members, from the pulpits of their own churches, from hostile voices that scream at them as they enter clinics. Women are often even afraid to admit to the people they love the most that they had an abortion. This is true in spite of the fact that next to pregnancy, abortion is the most common experience that women could possibly share. We talk often about the statistic that 1 out of every 8 women will get breast cancer. 1 out of every 7 women will experience rape. 1 out of every 3 women will choose abortion, but they don't talk about it. While religious support for abortion is very crucial, the ways that we understand and address the issue has changed a great deal. We've been learning a lot over the past few decades. One thing that we've learned is it's not just about abortion. The decision to abort a pregnancy does not happen in a vacuum. It's closely related to other conditions in a woman's life, other challenges that she has in her life. Every single social problem affects women in far greater numbers than that same problem affects men. And these problems have direct correlation and impact on a woman's ability to freely decide when and if to have children. Let's look at poverty as an example, because of course lack of money is often a reason that women cite for wanting to delay or avoid pregnancy. In 2012, over 5 million more women than men were living below the poverty line, and 2 million more women than men were living in deep poverty. For women aged 18 to 64, the poverty rate was 15.4% compared to 11.9% for men of the same age. Families headed by a single adult are more likely to be headed by women, and these female-headed households are at a greater risk of poverty. Almost 31% of households headed by a single woman were living below the poverty line. Now, since poverty is a women's issue, obviously, all other problems that are linked to poverty are also women's issues. Access to quality health care, racism, healthy food options, the ability to earn a living wage, access to education, living in high-crime neighborhoods, access to transportation, affordability of good child care. The problems of impoverished young women are truly endless. Now, you would think that upon hearing statistics like that, our entire nation would be moved to compassion and want to do something to help those women. But as we heard from our Republican leaders, many simply refuse to see. They blame those that are entrapped in unjust systems. Or they insist that the victims brought it on themselves, or that the victims could just change the situation if they just worked hard enough. Now, some people do see the unjust systems, and they feel their own sense of shame that our nation allows such problems to be so pervasive. But then they feel helpless in the face of such corrupt and complex systemic problems. Too often, good religious people find it much easier just to give handouts than to take the time to work on real solutions to systemic problems. Let's consider our scripture for a moment. Jesus was an itinerant preacher, teacher, healer, and activist. He traveled from village to village, and everywhere he went, the scripture says, he encountered people in pain. What was causing their pain? Well, we know from the related texts that surround these two little verses: hunger, disease, things they didn't understand, that they only referred to either as demons or unclean spirits. But in these verses, we see that they're more than just in pain. The scripture says that everywhere he looked, Jesus saw people who were harassed and helpless. Now, harassment is a special kind of pain, isn't it? It is intentionally inflicted by others in persistent, annoying ways. It is a kind of pain that you can't just shake off because you want to. You didn't cause it. You don't have the power to fix it. So what harassment and helplessness was he referring to? What were the causes of that pain? I say that they were twofold. From looking at the whole of those Gospels, that the problems were twofold that Jesus was fighting against. First, bad government policy that favored the wealthy. And secondly, bad religion that placed obedience to rules over compassion for the masses. Things haven't changed much. Jesus had no tolerance for such harassment of the people. He had no patience with the powerful who would not recognize that their privilege was the cause of other people's pain. He saw harassment and helplessness and had compassion. For the past 2 months, I have been working with thousands of others on the problem of police brutality in Ferguson, Missouri, 11 miles from my home. I keep hearing people say, oh, it's just a few bad cops, get rid of those and everything will be fine. I would say maybe there aren't actually any bad cops. Maybe the problem is a really stinking system. Maybe there are lots of really good men and women that have become police officers for the right reasons, but find themselves trapped in a system that encourages them to behave in cruel ways. It causes them to see residents of their own communities as enemies, causes them to overreact to the simplest, most innocent of actions. It's a system that punishes people when they are too poor to pay city fees, too poor to pay off their traffic tickets, and therefore then it issues arrest warrants, more money that they have to come up with. There are more outstanding arrest warrants in the city of Ferguson than there are residents. The city would completely collapse if they were not charging the excessive fees that they are. Debtors' prisons are real in my community. The residents of Canfield Apartments, where Mike Brown was shot, are in Ferguson. But they aren't allowed to send their children to Ferguson Public Schools. The district lines got redrawn so that the residents of this particular neighborhood, almost entirely black, have to go to Normandy Public Schools, a neighboring district, the worst district in the state that's lost its accreditation. What choices did Mike Brown's mothers have in raising her children? Could she just pack up and move into a safer neighborhood? One that had good schools? Why should women like her care about all of the new restrictions to abortion access when their most basic necessities of life go unmet day after day after day? We can get all worked up about restrictions to abortion access that are sweeping the nation and putting clinics out of business and making it difficult for women to access quality abortion care. And we should be upset about that. I'm upset about that. But let's look more closely. And we're going to see that those states, like Missouri, my state, those states with the toughest abortion restrictions are the same states that refuse money to expand Medicaid for the working poor. They are the same states that have the worst infant mortality rates. They are the same states with the lowest minimum wage and the highest poverty. They are the same states with the highest illiteracy rates. States that don't allow abortion access do not respect women in any way. It's not just a struggle over abortion. It's about the most basic respect for women and their families. Sadly, they're also the most religious states. Talk about harassed and helpless, harassed by bad government and bad religion. See, we can't put abortion rights over into this silo and just try to work on this one issue and think it's going to be okay. So now we work on reproductive justice. Please know that's not just the latest politically correct term for abortion rights, because that would do an incredible injustice not just to the terminology, but to the wonderful women who coined that term. Loretta Ross came up with that term, and it came out of a woman of color movement that said, we're not just about abortion, we are whole women. We have a lot of problems, and all of these things run together, and we can't just separate them all. We have to treat the whole woman. So we must always give credit to Loretta and women of color who have caused us to learn and to think in more intersectional ways. Reproductive justice is a systemic analysis of everything that impacts a woman's ability to choose freely. It is the right of all persons to have children or to prevent them from coming along too soon. But it is also the right to have safe communities in which to raise children, to be able to feed children, to be able to send them to schools that are not failing. Women are whole people, and women experience all of these injustices at exactly the same time. In my work at Faith Aloud, we seek to show compassion to those who are feeling harassed and helpless by providing spiritual counseling when it's requested, by also, though, doing the more difficult work of long-term engagement in the community to involve ourselves in issues that are the real inhibitors to women's choices. We bring a religious critique to the immoral harassment of women. Our partnership with Judson seeks to expand both our counseling services and our faith-based advocacy for those who are harassed by public policies. Over the next several months, we're going to be planning for this expansion, identifying new places to do religious work for reproductive justice, and training people of faith to become active in the movement. We want to take this important work to states in the South who have faced the toughest new restrictions. And our plan is to work specifically with social justice organizations that are addressing the most difficult problems that women face. In the scripture, Jesus says that the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. My ask is simple. Become a worker. If Howard Moody and the people of Judson had not begun the clergy consultation service on abortion, it is quite likely that I would not be doing the work that I am today. Judson can once again be that leader, developing a program that reaches out across the country, securing better conditions for women in the unforeseen future. The Reproductive Justice Task Force needs your support. Faith Aloud needs your support. I hope that you'll stay for the conversation after our service today so that we can continue to make those plans to make a difference in women's lives. Thank you.